Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's APM webinar, Running a PMO During COVID. I'm delighted that Emma can join us today. My name's Robert Allen, I'm APM Branches Manager, and I'll be your host for today. I'm delighted to see so many people have joined us. I hope you're all keeping well and you're looking forward to this webinar. We're certainly keen for your interaction today, and there'll be some polls along the way. But if you have some questions, please submit those in your control panel, and time dependent, I'll put those to Emma at the end. I would personally like to say thank you to all the APM branches and the APM SIGs, the committees and volunteers for all their efforts with the webinars over the last few months and into the future. So I'm delighted to pass over to Emma. Emma, over to you.
Brilliant, thanks Robert, and thanks for that great introduction for the SIGs and the branches. I think we've all been working really hard to get as many events as we can for people to kind of learn from our experiences during lockdown. So hi, my name's Emma-Ruth Arnaz Pemberton. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the chair of the APM PMO Specific Interest Group. I'm actually a fellow of the APM and I'm an NLP Master Practitioner as well as an Axelos P3M3 Assessor. For my day job, I'm the Director of Consulting Services at a project management consultancy called Wellington, and I live and breathe PMO. So if you want to find me on social media, you can do so by searching PMO Ninjas and you'll find me pretty quickly, I suspect. So today we're going to be looking at the challenges and opportunities of running a PMO during this crazy 2020 year of COVID and lockdowns and curfews and all sorts of other things and fun. We're going to be looking at some of the stats from the industry. We're also going to be looking into the realities of PMO right now, and a lot of this information is coming from kind of the community that I have of lots of PMO people, as you can imagine, and some of the things that they're facing, as well as some of the opportunities that that's brought with it as well, because believe it or not, there are some. And also talking a little bit about some of the next steps that maybe you and your PMO can take to kind of make yourselves, come out of this year into 2021 strong and ready to support your organisations. So before we start, I do have a couple of polls for you with Robert is going to be doing. The first one is around finding out a little bit about you. What project role typically do you perform? And then we have another one which is really about understanding how you've been affected by the pandemic. So Robert, over to you.
Perfect, thank you, Emma. So that's live and that's on the screen, and I can see we're getting a great response at the moment. I'll certainly read out the percentages towards the end, but we're up to 55% of the over 100 people with us today, which is great. So I'm gonna push people to get to about the 80% completion rate before I share the results. I'm that kind of host. I'm not gonna give the information until people get involved. So we're skyrocketing up, which is great. And we've definitely got a variety of people with us today as well, which is also great to see. Okay, so we're coming up just past the 70 mark. Excellent. Nice. So I will bring this to a close, but I'll share the results. So we've got 40% of the people that have joined us today are PMO related or leadership, 37% project delivery, 16% leadership, 6% educator or consultant, and 1% from non-for-profit.
Oh, hello, 1% non-project. It's nice to see that you're joining to learn some stuff. Cool. And then the second poll that we have is to really understand how your PMO, if you have one, has been affected or impacted by the pandemic. And we're really looking at lots of different things that I've seen happening. So either we've not been impacted at all, we've kind of continued as we were. We're doing all the same stuff, but we're just doing it virtually. We've had to change some of our ways of working, or we've had to actually completely change everything about our team. And the one that we don't want to see, but we've been furloughed or disbanded, which unfortunately we have seen a few PMOs. So again, Robert, over to you. Excellent,
thank you, Emma. And I'll try and read out the answers correctly this time. I put my teeth back in. But yeah, we're getting some good involvement, skyrocketing past the 60%. So it's great to see everyone's getting involved. I'll start sharing I'll soften my hardness. We are 47%, 46%, we are doing the same work, but virtually. 40%, we've had to change some of our ways of working. Sadly, 8% on furlough, but let's bring that to a close and share. And it has changed a little bit since I started reading those out. So 40%, we are doing the same work, but virtually. 38%, we have had to change some of our ways of working. 7%, we've had to change everything about our team.
Cool. Okay, thank you very much for that. So it's interesting to see that actually most of us have made the switch to virtual working, and yeah, a majority of the rest, we've had to change some of the things that we do. We've not been able to just kind of lift and shift everything into that virtual environment. And yeah, we know, we've seen that some PMOs, you know, we have furloughed or we've had to change the complete way that we work. And we're going to talk about some of that and the impact on COVID a little bit later. So thank you for that, and thank you for your amazing engagement. It's always really good to get a little bit of an opinion from the people listening. So first of all, I wanted to kind of talk about some remote working statistics. These are from a few different sources, as you can tell. But yeah, we can see that actually 74% of people would actually consider changing to a more flexible working arrangement in the future. So if and when things get back to normal, actually 3/4 of people would say, I'd really quite like to have that ability to choose where I can be at home or I can be in the office. And I think that's one of the things that we have shown, is that a lot of the stuff we can do can be done from home. Also thinking a little bit about how people have been spending their time. So I have a couple of polls running on my social media at the moment to kind of understand what people have been doing. And a lot of people have been using the time that they have, that magical, in the olden days when we used to say, I just need an extra couple of hours every day to get the work done. And a lot of people have used that extra couple of hours of not commuting to actually learn new skills. And what's really interesting, or what I find interesting, is the information, how we retain information. And actually, the research is showing from WeForum that virtually, when we're doing and learning things virtually, we actually retain a lot more information than we would do in a classroom, because there are less distractions. We can learn at our own pace. We can rewind if we need to as well, and kind of go through things over and over again. So we start to see a higher retention of information for longer when people are doing things virtually. There are also some downsides to that, and that is that human experience of, you know, talking with your peers and sharing experiences and things like that. But there has been 425% uptake in online learning courses since the pandemic started. So companies like Udemy, which I'm sure some of you have used, and LinkedIn Learning and other companies are available, have actually really seen that massive uptake. And we'll talk a little bit about the pluses and minuses of that a little bit later when it comes to your actual PMO. This one I found really interesting. It's a little bit confusing, so I'm just going to pull out a few specific items. This is from McKinsey, and some of the things that they were trying to figure out is how have the things that we do changed in terms of frequency, and some that are really a bit more specific to our PMO world is kind of that sharing, testing and learning. So doing that knowledge management, that experience sharing has actually gone from happening probably more quarterly to happening kind of monthly, if not weekly. So we are seeing that the things that we used to do, you know, every 6 months or every quarter, people are asking for that much more frequently now. And we think that's because it used to be quite easy to walk down the corridor and effectively just see what people were doing and ask them, whereas now, without that visibility, psychologically, certainly some senior leaders feel like they need more reports and they need more touch points with people. And we can also see that in kind of that reallocation of talent, digital talent in particular, according to this, across moving people around projects, business functions, etc. Whereas we used to do, you know, a lot of our annual planning and looking at resource management, maybe on a quarterly basis if you do it well, maybe even less than that. Again, we're seeing that that's happening much more quicker now, much more frequently. And a really interesting one for me is the bottom one, which is where we defund underperforming activities. So coming down to our annual planning, you know, we're very used to once a year sitting down and our senior team saying, what projects do we want to do next year? Now, because of COVID, that's actually happening on a monthly basis, at least, if not weekly in some industries, because the world is changing so much all the time around us. that we're having to stop projects a lot quicker. We're having to start up brand new projects that we never would have thought of and things like that. So we are seeing that a lot of PMOs as a result have become more tactical because they're having to provide more information more frequently, as opposed to maybe that monthly steering committee pack that they would have created before. So these kinds of things have had an impact on the way that our PMOs work. The last kind of set of stats that I want to give you are to do with actual PMOs. And this is from the State Project Management Survey that Wellington do once a year. This is kind of the latest 2020 version. And we found that 89% of organisations have one or more PMOs. So that's a great number. But when we ask a separate question, which has your PMO reached its full potential, only 40 to 45% of people say that they actually have. So although partly maybe because we are quite tactical in some organisations, we are seen as that kind of administrative support, most PMOs and senior leaders of PMOs don't feel like the PMO is actually reaching its potential. And that's a huge delta. It's a great number for people that have PMOs to pull on, but we need to be better at deciding how our PMO is going to add value to our business, excuse me. So those are kind of just some interesting stats around virtual working, around the frequency of things that are being requested from PMOs, as well as some pure PMO statistics. And now what I want to do is kind of talk about the reality of PMOs right now. So the reality for many PMOs is that we've got fewer people. Whether we've made a decision to furlough some people, certainly in the UK, whether we've decided as a business that we're not going to renew contracts, which a lot of people and organisations have done, and people have been impacted by that because organisations needed to protect their cash flow, quite honestly, in many ways. So we are finding that PMOs right now have fewer people to pull on, fewer people in the team to be able to say, oh, can you just pick this up? So we're having to juggle a lot more. We've actually found that quite a lot of PMOs have become quite reflective in terms of it's really brought home the value that they add and how they can add more value in the future. So one of the things that I found since late June, early July, is that lots of PMOs have been kind of taking a step back, doing a maturity assessment, for example, to understand where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are that they can improve on, but also how they can adapt for whatever the new future looks like, whether it's completely working virtually or doing a bit of a hybrid, or supporting our businesses with new and different things. As a result of that, I've actually been doing maturity assessments pretty solidly since end of June, beginning of July, because it has kind of caused people to take a step back and really reflect on how they're performing and the value they're adding. And I think for me, as an NLP mass practitioner and a mindfulness practitioner, I think that's a great thing. I think as adult professionals, we don't do that enough. I kind of take a step back from the day-to-day and really see how we're doing. The other thing which we've seen from that McKinsey research is we've become a lot more tactical in many cases. And obviously these are sweeping statements, but it's just can only give you my perspective. We have become a lot more tactical with more reporting, more ad hoc reporting being requested and developed, new types of reports that people need to see that we never would have created before. So a lot of that work that we were doing has accelerated in terms of having reports that are more real-time or self-service so that people can go and find them. And that is in part, I think, because of the psychological impact of not being able to walk down the corridor into the PMO office and ask a question. People are wanting more things to, for them to be able to go and get that data, that information, but also at the same time reducing the crazy amount of emails and chat messages that we probably all get every day. The other thing, which again was highlighted in that McKinsey report, is moving work around. I don't know if many of you have had this experience, but we've seen lots of projects have been stopped completely. Lots of projects have been placed on hold. Lots of new projects have started that we didn't have before. We've all had to move very quickly into that digital space, and that's had an impact on the work that we were doing, on the strategy and direction of many businesses and in turn many PMOs. So we're constantly kind of juggling that tactical perspective, which by definition then usually means that we've got to move some work around, we've got to start and stop things a lot quicker than we would have done before. And the last one of the reality of being in PMO right now is that we're missing that community element. That's one of the things that's really suffered, is all the community events. You know, we might have done some lunch and learn sessions, we might have done some really nice workshops. Because we've had to be more tactical, we've had to focus a lot more on moving that work around with less people, doing more with less in some ways. That's one of the things that has fallen. And it's a real shame, because as humans, although we are connected all the time, I'm sure you're all eating your lunch whilst you're listening to me ramble on about PMO, we're actually really disconnected on a human level. And we'll talk about that a little bit in a short while. But really missing that community element of our PMOs with the project managers and with all of our other PMO customers. And that's really, when I talk to people who are in PMO, these are the things that are really falling out, is we miss that culture, that community element. That's a really big thing at the moment. So hopefully that's just giving you a little bit of an insight, and I hope that some of this resounds with you. Maybe your PMO is very different, but I think at least one of these will probably really kind of make you think, yeah, actually, I'm not alone. And that's one of the key messages today, is you're not alone. We're all going through it in one way or another. So next, I want to kind of deep dive a little bit deeper into some of the challenges of those realities. So the first one is around structure. One of the other things that's fallen down since the pandemic started is governance and assurance. And again, it sounds like it should be easier, because I can just create a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting, and everybody's available all the time, right? Because everyone's at home. But actually, we've found that governance and assurance activity calendar, if you like, has been relatively inconsistent. Because we're moving things so quickly that we don't have time to prepare for the more traditional, let's sit down and have that stage gate review meeting and really go into detail about everything, because we're firefighting a lot of the time, or it feels like we are anyway. So a lot of assurance and governance has kind of reduced in terms of quality, and also in terms of frequency. Partly as well because we've had people off. Some people have been off with COVID, some people haven't been available because they've been furloughed, etc., etc. So delivering remote governance and assurance has proved a little bit of a challenge for people, and we really need to take some time, some of that reflective practice, to really think about what we can do about that, and we'll talk about that when we look at the other side of this coin, which are the opportunities. Connectivity, I've just mentioned that we are over connected, I think it's fair to say, but on a human level we're actually quite disconnected, and we're really craving that community, that tribal. I want to be around people. Certainly my role used to be, I was on the road 4 or 5 days a week. I'm not used to being in one room constantly every day, and that's been a personal challenge for me to kind of adapt to that. And a lot of people think, well, it's fine because you're talking to people all the time and you're doing really cool webinars and you're doing, you know, online training and all sorts of things. But that human connection is the thing that there's a real disconnect there for most of us. And because people are at home, there are a lot more distractions, but there are also a lot more stressors. And that's really impacted some people. If you were some of the people who had kids at home for, you know, most of the last term, you'll know that it isn't as simple as, oh, well, just because I've got Teams, I can be on calls all the time every day, because there are other things going on as well. And that leads me nicely into the challenge around flexibility. How do we book meetings when people are doing inconsistent hours? Because, you know, we're all potentially working slightly differently. The days of you will be here 8:30 till 5:30, Monday to Friday, and you get an hour lunch are kind of gone in many ways. You know, sometimes some people get up early, then they have a break so they can take the kids to school, then they carry on working, then they have a break in the afternoon, and they might work a bit later. Most people that know me think I'm not a morning person at all. People don't book meetings with me at 9 o'clock in the morning. 9:30 is kind of the cut-off time. But this has allowed me to kind of get up a bit later, which works for me, start work a bit later, and then I work later into the evening. That's just how my makeup is in that sense. Whereas other people, some of the people that work for me, you know, they wake up at 6 and they work until 3. So we're trying to deal with doing the same meetings, the same governance and assurance, the same kind of stuff, but actually dealing with really inconsistent hours that people are working. The next challenge is the influx of technology. One of the massive things that this pandemic has brought is all of the different ways that we now talk to each other. I'm sure you all use several mediums in order to talk to your colleagues, your families, your friends. And yeah, that's caused an insane amount of challenges in that people assume that everybody would just get Zoom. And lots of people don't just get Zoom. You know, not everybody is as tech savvy as everybody else. And one of the challenges has been supporting our employees to figure out how to use the technology, what to use it for, when it's appropriate, when it's not appropriate, which is really important. What are the different functionalities that are included, which, by the way, are changing on a daily basis almost. You know, how do we deal with certain security implications and things like that? So that's been a real challenge both for individuals, but also for organizations who now have to figure out how to rationalize that tool set now that things have kind of probably settled down a little bit, albeit we're still probably using lots of different technology. And learning, I mentioned learning earlier around, we have had this massive uptake of virtual learning, and it's a great thing from my perspective because it opens up many more opportunities for your PMO in terms of the services that you weren't able to offer before. But we also need to be very careful about that term expert, so much so so in my world we've actually banned the term expert because it kind of lends itself to I've asked the expert, quite often that's Google, and I don't need to go anywhere else. So we need to be mindful that although people are taking the time to learn, that a course, an hour on an online learning platform doesn't make you an expert in anything. It's experience. It's having the war wounds, if it's anything to do with project management, having lived and survived through some of those really difficult projects, that actually gives you that level of experience and expertise to be successful. So we need to be mindful that we're not just, well, I've ticked that box and therefore that makes me an expert. And how we then bring that into our organizations, we're going to have, when we go back to normal, lots of people, I'm sure, that are going to come in and say, I've done all of these courses online. A lot of them maybe aren't quality checked by the organization. A lot of it might be opinion. So we need to be that's going to be a challenge, I think, for PMOs in terms of taking that and making it realistic for what we actually want to do within our PMOs. And last but not least, something that crops up every time that I'm involved in any kind of community event with PMO people is job security, and the fact that in some cases it's not as secure as we were before. It has really, for some organizations, it has really brought up the question of what is the value of having this PMO? If I've got perfectly good project and program managers, what do I need a PMO for? Which is kind of the age-old question that's been asked many times for many years. And there are ways of dealing with that, absolutely. But it is something that the pandemic has brought. And it's not just PMOs. Many other industries have been impacted. Many other roles have been impacted by that same thing of, well, if I can just do all of this virtually, you know, there's more technology, there's more AI. What do we need all of this for? So kind of 6 challenges there that we see, and it's important that we don't just focus on the negative. So we're now going to look at some opportunities that have come from this whole situation as well. So when we think about a structure, now is a really good time for you to review what your PMO offers your business. It helps to answer that job security question. It helps to answer that, how do we offer, what kind of governance and assurance can we offer on an online basis? So now's a great time to look at, what does your organization need right now? What has been challenging? Chances are that move to digital was pretty painful if you weren't already most of the way there. Many organizations were still deliberating on whether they should or shouldn't go digital. So I'd imagine in some cases it's been really painful, and that will have brought with it some challenges that we weren't expecting. So now's a really good time to look at our service catalogue, understand what do we offer, do we need to adapt that, and where a lot of PMOs have in the past been quite inflexible in terms of this is what we do, this is all we do, and that's it. I think now's the time where we need to be have more agility and adaptability to the situation, which I think as individuals we've all done really well. I think most if not all have adapted to the situation quite well eventually. In terms of connectivity, I keep coming back to that community. Your people are craving this, so as much as you probably are. So now again is a brilliant time to start to think about standing up that community of practice internally, getting involved with external networking and communities of practice, of which there are many, and really starting to bring people together so that everybody, we can't assume everybody's having, you know, a really fulfilling day every day sitting at home. I think many people think that, but you know, in many cases it's very much the opposite. So now's a really perfect time that, you know, things are starting to settle. We kind of know where we are in terms of, you know, the immediate 2-3 weeks, and really bringing together your people, your PMO, your project managers, you know, anybody involved in project management in your organization to maybe, you know, learn about some of the things that we've learned, that we've changed, that we've had to adapt to over the last few months, and how that looks in the future. I feel quite passionately about that community piece, as you can probably tell. In terms of the challenge of flexibility, we flip it on its side. Actually, now's a really great time to take a pragmatic approach to how we do projects. So again, quite a lot of PMOs, we've kind of done it the way we've always done it. We're been quite stuck and you know, forcefully kind of putting projects through certain gates and assurance activities and governance activities, and they're all still really important. But let's also take the view that we know governance and assurance has suffered in terms of how much we've been able to do remotely. So maybe now's a good time to kind of go, well, if we've survived without 17 touch points, we've survived with 8, maybe that's something that we can change for the future. So revising our standards, our methods, based on what we've learned over these last few months of having to spin up projects really quickly, close down projects really quickly, move projects through gates, even though people weren't always there, and having to change the approach a little bit to kind of fit with the fact that we are working in a dispersed way. So I think now's a really good opportunity to look at that and maybe take a pragmatic approach to how you do projects in your organization. In terms of technology, I think this is an area where PMOs can really support their businesses and their employees, and not just the project community, but almost everybody that works in your organization. I think it's one of the biggest challenges that people have had on a human level, is to suddenly have to learn all of this technology and try to keep up with the changes. You know, you can log into some systems on a weekly basis and it looks different. And that can be quite scary, it can be quite daunting and really quite intimidating. And a lot of people don't want to put their hand up and say, I really struggle with this. So I think defining what technology do we have within our business, what's appropriate for what, you know, GoToWebinars appropriate for broadcasts like we're doing today. You know, Microsoft Teams is useful for internal work that's happening because we can chat and things like that. Zoom might be better for, you know, some community type stuff because it has, you know, lots of really nice functionality like breakout rooms and things like that, or whatever you're using. But given that we've just talked about the importance of community right now, I think that's one way that we can give people a safe space to learn about what is the technology, what are the key things that the people need to know about it, what are the things to watch out for as well, in terms of whether it's security or inviting people or setting it up and things like that. So I think there's a huge opportunity there for PMOs to kind of help with that as well. And then lastly, learning. So we've talked about the challenge of that. You know, potentially we've got lots of people coming back to the world of PMO, particularly after being furloughed with brand new skills. And we need to analyze that and understand how we can bring those skills into the PMO and give people the ability to develop on those skills, assuming they're not experts after doing one course, and kind of giving them the headspace that they've had over the last 8 months to actually take that to a new level. The chances are they've done it because they felt it was a personal challenge for them to do, that something they've been interested for a really long time and never had the opportunity to learn. It might be that it's something that really interests them in terms of, this is something that we don't offer, and we've never had the ability to upskill to be able to offer it for our business, and something that is going to add real value. So not poo-pooing it and kind of saying, well, just because you did it there and you know it was free or whatever, then it doesn't count, but actually looking at what people have been interested in, really thinking about that development opportunity for people and how it can impact your PMO on the positive side as well. So those are some opportunities. Like I say, every cloud has a silver lining. We've looked at the challenges, we've looked at the opportunities, and the next thing I wanted to share with you is the last thing I want to share with you really, is the PMO value lifecycle. This is something that I use to talk to people about PMO and why PMOs, in some ways, don't show value. We've talked about job security. We've talked about PMOs being challenged in terms of what's the point of you. I actually got asked that question face to face one time when I was running the PMO, and it's quite a scary conversation to have with somebody, particularly because it usually comes from somebody that doesn't know that much about PMO or project management. But the PMO value lifecycle, I believe, is one of the things that we can really use to help our PMOs to kind of shine. And when I look at PMOs that have been disbanded or that have failed or that have been forced to kind of change in different ways, I tend to find that one of these 4 steps is missing. True story. So capturing the value of a PMO is the first step. And we've all been there, where we've been asked to set up a PMO and we've kind of gone straight into delivering that PMO because we know we're the experts, so we know what a PMO should be. Quite often the bit that we don't do is ask why. So understanding the why do you want a PMO, and this is something that if your PMO is being challenged since lockdown, or you feel like you've gone so tactical that you're not adding the value that you were, this is a great kind of 4-step process to kind of get down to the bare bones of why you're there. And that first thing is that why. What are you expecting from us in this new world, or from this PMO? So actually capturing the value. And one of the ways that I absolutely recommend and have used it myself is to take out the project speak. So use actual real human words, and to capture the value. So almost, if you fill in the sentence, fill in the blanks, you know, as a CEO of an organization, I want a PMO because, and it's that because that's going to get them to think about what are the pain points, what's the challenge or the opportunity that I'm trying to fix by having this PMO. If you already have a PMO, you can ask the question, I want to transform the PMO because, and because will trigger them to think about what's the key thing that PMO can add value or that can fix, that can make better. So almost, like I say, taking out the human speak. And what you'll find, if you ask different people at different levels of the organization, so, you know, as a resource manager, I want a PMO because I don't know what my people are doing for the next 3 months, as an example. So you'll get different perspectives, and it will really help you to decide where do you then need to put the effort. And what you'll find a lot of the time is that what we think PMOs should be in our organization, what we believe our organization needs, is very different to what they actually tell us when we ask them outright. Perception is a huge part of this, that we all have our own perception based on how we've been brought up, or the things that we've been exposed to in life, you know, external stimuli, internal stimuli within our organizations, and also our values and our way of being. So your perception will be different to other people's. So why shouldn't we ask them? Once you know that, you can then decide what you're going to offer your customers effectively. So what are the services that your PMO is going to offer through that and deliver to your organization? So, you know, Monitor, control and report is quite a common one. We see most PMOs, I would say. I've only ever known one PMO that doesn't report on project and program status and you know, risk thresholds and things. And so that's quite a common one. Also, you know, we might have information management. If one of the things from our project managers is, I want a PMO or I want to transform the PMO because I don't know where to find information, information management is something that, again, is quite a common thing. So by using those pain points, you can almost look at what are you doing today? Is that all adding value to those people and those groups of people? Or actually, is that something that you do because you kind of like to do it? Which is it's a real trap that we get into. So we can then deliver the services that are going to add value, that are going to hit those pain points. And that's not to say that those people are going to get everything they ever asked for. I want something versus what I actually need is quite often very different. But at least we've listened and we've looked at it with an informed view and a pragmatic head to understand what can we actually do. Once we've done that, this is quite often another step that sometimes get missed. So sometimes we ask why we deliver, we put our services in place, but we don't measure it. We measure the performance of projects and programs and portfolios. We measure the performance of the project managers, but quite often we don't measure ourselves. And that's one of the things that fundamentally is going to show value to your organization. If you can show that out of these services, each one of these is being tracked in terms of how you are delivering it, not what percentage compliance do we have, but turning it on its head, will help your organization to understand the value. It's something that you can publish and share. You can show the journey that you're on, but also it will make you really credible in the eyes of the delivery teams. You know, at the moment you might be saying, oh, we want you to be transparent and honest in your reports. If it's red, it's because it's a cry for help, and it's not about holding your feet to the fire, it's about supporting you. But at the same time, we're not being transparent. No one knows what we actually do. Very few people know what we do in the background. There's a reason why all of my social media is PMO ninjas. And that's because we're quite stealthy, like ninjas. We do a lot of stuff in the background. You know, we kind of happen there, we're there, but many people don't know we exist, and they certainly, many don't know the level of work that goes into that report that we sent out, or that pack, or those templates, or that method, or that system, whatever it is that we're delivering, or training courses even. So we are actually quite stealthy, and sometimes we're quite ruthless as well in terms of, no, this needs to happen, how we say it needs to happen. But if we're not transparent in our own journey, how are we credible to the people that we're asking them to be transparent to us? So for me, this is one of the fundamental steps of stopping that question dead. What's the point of view? Is, well, this is the point, this is the value that we add, that you won't see day to day because you see an output of a very lengthy and, you know, blood, sweat and tears that many PMOs have to go through to get to that end product. And the last step of the value life cycle before I finish off and go to questions is we don't communicate enough. It is incredible how in PMOs we focus on the negative, we focus on the lessons learned, what could we have done better? But we very rarely shout about the good stuff that we do. You know, we did this, we developed this, and it's made a massive difference to our project managers. We need to get much, much, much better at that, in my view, because again, we're like ninjas. We sit in the background, we do stuff in the background, lots of really valuable stuff, but many people don't know we exist. So the only way to do that is to communicate. We have to communicate at different levels so that, you know, if people in different teams who aren't involved in project management use the intranet, use something that is indirect to let them know that we're there. We need to get better at sticking our head up above the parapet and kind of saying, hi, we're here and we do good stuff. Because that's what happens with a lot of the project and delivery teams is, you know, at the end of a project, let's have a, certainly we used to anyway, let's have a pizza party and, you know, shout about the fact that we did this really good thing and we delivered it and it was to time, cost and quality, excuse me. So we need to, as PMOs, get better. And this is something that I want you to reflect on. Keep going back to this reflective practice. Right now, capture the value of what your future PMO might be able to provide in terms of service and value to its organization. Ask people, given the world we're in now, what can we do? What can we change to make life a bit better? remember, we have the people that deliver projects. We deliver for projects. So it's for them. It's not for us to be comfy. It's for the people that are delivering the projects. That's why we're there. So we need to ask all of those people, what is your perception of the value of our PMO? Then we take that, and I strongly suggest you write down all the stuff you do today. You'll be surprised how much stuff you actually do, and kind of set that against those pain points, those challenges, those opportunities, so that you can actually make sure you're still delivering the right thing for not the PMO of a year ago, but the PMO of now and the PMO of in 3 months' time, because let's face it, the world is changing at the moment almost on a monthly basis. So we need to, whatever it is, it needs to be adaptable. We need to figure out how to measure it as well, how to show that we're delivering that service in a positive way, so we can really show that value, and it will stop people asking that question. And that final step is to communicate. Make sure you start this community up. Let people know that you're there. Virtual communities are massive at the moment, and people are craving it, so you will get engagement. Are you going to have to drive it in the beginning? Yes, but it's a great thing to do. It's going to make them feel good about having a PMO. It's going to make them feel good about the stuff that you're talking about fixing and things like that. It's going to do you good, because you're going to realize that it's not pushing water uphill all the time. And I appreciate that this sounds probably very happy clappy, and some of us are in that difficult situation where our job security isn't there. We can't magically transform everything. But if you can, just start with that reflective practice of what could we do differently based on what we know today and the lessons that we've learned over the last year. And that's it from me. So I'm going to hand back to Robert just in case we have any questions. Yeah, and we'll see what we've got.
Excellent. Thank you, Emma. Thank you for sharing some great knowledge and for highlighting PMOs. I'm personally delighted that I've now got the email address for Ninja. So I'm definitely going to make contact with you in the future. Just to give you a short break, there's been some lovely comments from people. Jonathan said, this is a great set of slides. Will they be made available after the session? Jonathan and everyone, we're recording this session. Emma's kindly going to let us share that on APM YouTube, and we'll also make a news article for this. So please keep an eye on the APM website. Emma, I'll now move over to some questions. So Steve has asked, has the perceived value of PMO diminished during lockdown as some have been disbanded?
It's interesting because I've had kind of very opposite reports. It's a bit like communication, where you say, is communication easier or harder? Some people say, oh, it's so much easier now, and other people say it's so much harder now. And kind of the value PMO has been the same, because yes, you're right, we have had some PMOs disbanded, furloughed, etc. in the UK anyway, and others that have really come into their own, because let's think about what PMOs do. We take all of the noise of project management and we kind of cut through the chaos a little bit. And on some level, that might be our superpower, is that where we can be that calm head in, yes, we've got to spin up projects, we've got to stop projects very quickly. So I actually think that people are starting to see the value more, which is why a lot of organizations are doing these maturity assessments to kind of understand how they can make their PMO stronger, and people are investing in that. So I think that can only be a good thing. The danger is that the reason why people suddenly realize that we're there is because of this tactical element of the job that has grown so exponentially over the last 8 months of, you know, ad hoc reporting, developing new stuff, giving people and collating information. So I think it will be a real balance moving forward. But I actually think that PMOs, for the most part, have actually come into their own a little bit, in the sense of, you know, we've had to suddenly change the whole way that we support people and we run things and we start up things. And I think we've been the calm voice in the room, kind of cutting through that chaos. And on some level, I think that's when PMOs shine. You know, PMOs shine when everything around us is like, and we can kind of put a little bit of structure, discipline, not bureaucracy, we don't want that, into the mix to kind of calm everything down and go, it's fine, guys. We can spin up projects this quickly. We can close down projects and move people around this quickly to kind of preserve the business. The thing I would say about those that have in many ways been furloughed or disbanded, A lot of those are smaller businesses, certainly that I've spoken to. Quite a lot, you know, maybe are in the charity sector, so the sectors that have really suffered through COVID, and for, you know, for all the, they've kind of made choices based on the reasons that they have, and I think I suspect that when things start going back to normal, we'll start to see a little bit of an uplift. And our survey's going on at the moment, and quite often we ask the same questions, and one of those is, how many of you have one or more PMOs? And it will be interesting looking at last year's data, which was 89%, how that's dropped over the last year. And so we can really take a view on that. And, you know, as PMO SIG, if we do find that the value has dropped, then you know what, we'll go back to basics and we'll kind of start to shout about what is PMO and the value of a PMO all over again, like we had to do 10 years ago.
Excellent. Thank you, Emma. And I think that the next question from Catherine kind of ties into your final couple of sentences there about looking back, but perhaps looking to the future, and how will the role of PMO be different in the future post-pandemic?
So interestingly enough, I did this poll on social media, both across my UK community or English speaking community and Spanish speaking community, and there was some real like commonalities that came out of what does the 2021 PMO look like. One is around agility and being able to adapt to the situation quickly. So, you know, the day that somebody says, right, everything's back to normal, you need to pick up your stuff and go back in the office kind of thing, is being able to adapt. So that adaptability, that agility, virtual working, people seem to think that's going to be ongoing, certainly a degree of it. And I think most of us would agree that a balance of work and office work, homework and office work would be preferable for most of us. The other thing, interestingly, is wellness, employee wellness and team. And that is, I think, one of the things that I found, and it's a real positive in my mind, not necessarily to do with PMOs, but more organisationally, is we've seen the rise of trust. Whereas before, like I said, you know, you were in the office Monday to Friday, 8:30 till 5:30, you get an hour lunch. And what we've seen is, particularly in those more kind of bureaucratic organisations, is they've had to trust people. They've had to trust the fact that people are working at home. And so I think we've seen that rise of trust. But with that, we've also seen the rise of the concept of wellness of our employees. And many people have suffered in lots of different ways and needed help. And I think the PMO, one of the things, again, it was really commonalities that came out through these two polls that I did, was around supporting people on a human level. So I think that's going to be a big part of the future, is not just the technical aspects of project management, but the human first aspects of project management. And lastly, I think that community social element seems to be one of the things that people are talking about the most, if I'm honest. And that is because I think we've learned the value of community. I think that's one of the things I hope sticks around, is we now probably know all of our neighbours from standing in the garden, you know, at least 2 meters apart. For the first time, we've got that concept of the importance of community and speaking to people regularly, and, you know, taking the time to be with family and friends and colleagues who we actually miss quite a lot. So I would say those are the 4 big things. There is still a conversation going on around the technology and AI and what that's going to do. I'm a firm believer that you can automate so much, but it's always going to need a human touch. So don't be too scared about the stuff that you might read about AI, you know, kind of taking us all out. I do think there's always going to need to have that human perspective.
Excellent, thank you, Emma. And I think again this question follows on nicely. Jonathan's asked, and he's shared also, he said, I've seen a drive for increased frequency of reporting from PMOs as senior management feel removed from the project or the programme. I believe this is because they can't physically see the individuals in the team as they are remote working from home. Have you seen that trend? It feels like there's a decrease of trust, pushing an increase in the amount of reporting.
Thanks, Jonathan. That's really interesting. Yeah, we talked about that. So that McKinsey report very much shows that all the different things that we would normally, you know, be asked to create in terms of reporting and things is now happening much more, being requested much more frequently, I should say. Part of that, like I said earlier, is around protecting cash flow and making sure that we're doing the right projects for the right reasons, which is totally acceptable. The rise of requests of reports, I actually don't think it's a rise of mistrust. What I actually think it's like there's a psychological distancing if I can't just walk into your office and see you and look you in the whites of the eyes and ask you how things are going. And I think, so I don't think it's a lack of trust. I think it's more a lack of, because senior teams in particular historically haven't been particularly self-sufficient. So you know, I work for Microsoft Gold Partner. We put self-service reports into place, and it takes months for people to actually start using it. Actually, they still like to get, you know, a nice deck that comes into their inbox or lands on their desk. And I think what it's done is it's brought home the fact that they're not very self-sufficient, and that's why. So I think it tells you a little bit about them, about how they're feeling about themselves, but also that element of psychologically, we naturally distance ourselves if I can't see you ever. Whereas before, exactly like you said, Jonathan, people could just walk down the corridor and go, right, sit down, let's have a coffee, and that kind of thing. So yeah, like I say, I don't think it's mistrust. I think it's a symptom of the circumstance, as well as bringing home, hopefully, that people maybe need to be a little bit more self-sufficient if they have that access. The advice I would give you is start pointing them. If you do have anything that's self-service, is actually point people to that rather than send it by email. That's one of my tactics that I use quite a lot. When people keep asking me kind of the same question every month, it's like, you can actually find it here and just give them the link, and eventually it sinks in. It takes time, but it's a massive culture change to go from, you know, having a nice deck that I can write on my desk that makes a nice sound when it gets dropped, to going and finding the information for myself. And we shouldn't underestimate the scale of that culture change, especially given we've just gone through a massive culture change already.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Emma. Your answers, and I'm looking at the questions, making my job very easy today. I'm going to combine some of the questions. So from Mohammed, Geraldine, for example, and you shared about your emails and sharing. They've asked about tools. Can you please recommend some of the software that could be used in PMO, for example?
So you put me in a weird position because I work for Microsoft Gold Partner, and I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to try and sell you stuff. I think, yeah, in this forum, I can't do that. That would be a huge conflict of interest. There are lots of things out there. So I think, you know, do the search, find out what other people are using. One of the things that I strongly recommend is go onto the forums, the networks on LinkedIn, and really kind of have a look and ask the question, what are people using? Only because I don't want to get into trouble. Sorry.
That's fair enough. I never want to get on the bad side of the ninja. So yeah, I'm grateful that you just shared that information that you could. A couple of people have asked about connecting with you, and you mentioned about your polls to the community. Is the best way for people to reach out to you on LinkedIn or follow you on Twitter, or what's the best way?
So PMO SIG has a LinkedIn and a Twitter account, so you can just search for PMO SIG UK. If you want me specifically, then yeah, Twitter and LinkedIn are the two, I would say, most active areas, and that's where, like, my polls that I do kind of for my own development and stuff and research, they'll be on those. But yeah, literally, if you search on PMO Ninjas, you should find me. And if you don't, you can always email, you know, through Robert and the APM. You can always email and get in touch through the PMO SIG directly. Yeah,
no, excellent. Thank you, Emma. Yeah, definitely reach out to us. We can definitely connect people. Along with APM members, you've got the APM Hub as well that you can go and connect with your committee members. A great place to share knowledge and engage with each other. So Benjamin's asked, given the advance of technology and software to cut through the PM noise and provide objective and data-based insights, are key parts of the PMO being replaced by the role of a data scientist?
So we are seeing the rise of the data scientist much more within our role, within the PMO. But it's like I said earlier, I think AI is brilliant, and I use it myself, where I ask it questions and it gives me reports on the fly, and I find it fascinating. But I always think that data can only go so far. Data can turn into information with, you know, analysis. It can do some, let's say, perfect world scenario planning and things like that. Without human intervention, though, it isn't going to be able to tell us the impact on this project because of the vaccine that's just been approved today, for example. It's not going to tell us how people feel. So I think we can do so much, and what I think it will do is, rather than replace the PMO, I think we will see that data analysts, data scientists coming into play. What it will do is, I think it will remove some of the tactical work that PMOs do. So whereas today we might spend lots of time collating data and then manipulating it in a spreadsheet and then making it look pretty, and that in some organizations takes a heck of a lot of time. I think it will replace some of that, but what it will do is it will actually free us up to do more valuable work, like that supportive stuff and that community element, and focusing more on making sure that we're doing the right projects for the right reasons in the right way. So I don't see it as a direct replacement. I think it's going to add to what we do. I think it's going to add another layer of insight and intelligence that we don't have, because it's hard for us to be objective. And it's almost, we need to take the objective data view and put that human element into it, and that's when we'll get the answer for the future.
Excellent, thank you. So it only really leaves me to read out the lovely comments that are coming through. So people are saying thank you for the great advice shared. Can't wait to connect with you in the future and share within the polls as well. So Emma, on behalf of the APM and myself, and also everyone that's joined us, thank you for giving up your time and sharing your knowledge today.
No, that's amazing. Thanks for having me, and thanks everyone for joining, and I hope to connect with you soon.
Excellent, thank you. And everyone who's joined us today, thank you for taking the time and for getting involved in the polls and the questions. There's been some great ones, and I'll definitely send your comments through to Emma. Please keep an eye on the APM website, not only for this recording, but all the recordings from our webinars. The APM branches and the SIGs are doing some great work with producing these webinars. So keep an eye on the events tab on the APM website, and we hope to see you at future events. Most importantly, keep well, and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.